I was excited to do a recap for this league, and then I heard that your playoffs start week 14. So now I'm amped. I'm also confused, but I'm amped. I think this is the only league that I know of that is starting playoffs week 14, which is a controversial call, to say the least. But as in any rule with fantasy, if it was agreed on before the season, it's of course fair. So maybe not controversial, but you're definitely doing things differently. But I feel like that's not too new for this league, so I respect it. But that means that these games were massively, massively important. I do hope that teams are continuing to set their lineups, especially coming into this final week, now that it's going to really mean the world. So let's look at the standings again. I liked when we did this. We looked at the playoff picture. So let's look at the playoff picture, and then we'll talk about the position that teams are in while recapping last week, and we'll just make it this whole thing. So first, I want to give a huge round of applause to Team the Prophet. Not only do they get their first win, which should be the main highlight because that's gigantic, but it looks like the trade to get Jalen Waddle was genius. Look at me every week being so confident and shitting on Team the Prophet, and then they come in, they make a trade. I'm like, didn't love it for you, but it's a fair trade. But then you win it, clearly. I mean, obviously injuries played a part, but the fact that you get Jalen Waddle and he has a huge game for you is awesome for both you and the rest of the league. That, again, there's unwritten rules with fantasy football. You absolutely need to put effort in if you're the bottom of the standings. I know of leagues where you kick someone out if they either don't start someone in the final weeks or do something to help another team, whatever it might be. It should be 100% of effort no matter what your record is. And it seems like that is what you're doing, at least looking at this week's game. Really, really well managed, well played. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Team the Prophet now. I completely changed all my opinions about them. Bravo, bravo, bravo. And you're going to be able to play spoiler next week because you have Pollard, and Pollard is now a massive, massive part of that Dallas offense, given the fact that Zeke is going to either be out or managed with lesser snaps. For Team the Plague, youch. Really, really tough loss. I mean, you were 4-7 going into the game. You know that it's a game that everyone in the league has won this matchup. You're on your second time around in the standings, and you're the first team that unfortunately couldn't close the door against them. You were already looking like you were in a tough spot, but a win puts you at 5-7, and then you're a game out of the playoffs, and you never know what could happen with a high point total if you're able to accumulate that. Because of a low point total and a loss, you are eliminated from playoff contention. I think you were done chained earlier in the season. I hope I did done chain you earlier in the season, but this is a team that going into the season, I thought it was a solid draft, but just clearly nothing clicked. Some bad luck, some lack of instrumental moves that you could have made, apparently, and you're going to the bottom of the pit. Unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey gets injured for you. Actually, me and you had identical weeks. I have McCaffrey as well, and he's obviously done. But you also lose exactly by 20, which is what I lost by. So when we look back on this week, if McCaffrey played the second half, did we have a shot? Sure, we had a shot because McCaffrey's ridiculously good, but most likely that wasn't what decided it, and that's a good thing. You never want an injury to be the reason that your season's over. I think a lot of things, obviously McCaffrey being banged up hurt you, McMurray being banged up this season hurt you a ton, but at the end of the day, it was a combination of some bad luck and bad management. Wow. Even more similarly, by the way, both of us had Eli Mitchell on our bench, which is remarkably stupid of us, but with injuries and that SF backfield, you don't want to risk a zero burger. But if you played Mitchell, same exact thing as me, you would have won by 2 points. Wow, me and you, exact same situation. Anyway, fortunately, I'm still competitive record-wise, and unfortunately, your season's over. Hate to be that guy. So unnecessary to talk about my team, but just weird similarities. And again, I was definitely wrong about El Professor going to the season, so that is what it is. But now we're down to 8 teams fighting for those 6 spots, and this is a wide open playoff race. Less so, actually, weirdly enough, than other teams, because you have 5 teams that clinch the playoffs, so it's really only 1 spot. Usually there's a little bit more up for grabs, but that's still a lot going on. And of course, you have that bye as well that is technically up for grabs as well. So let's talk about those teams. So Crucifier is at 5-7 right now. Crucifier was in a game where a win would put them in a very solid position, and now they're in a very unsolid position where they're going to need a win and some help to make the playoffs. They lost 118 to the chairman's 147. Good news is great performance out of Aaron Rodgers. With that toe injury, you really want to see it. The bad news is Dalvin Cook is out. You lose him for this final gigantic week that you're going into next week. Again, this is a team that we've criticized because of a lack of moves. You have had both quarterback depth with Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. I know I'm talking about the same thing every week, but I'm just going to... This is the punishment for not making moves. And then also keeping both Seattle wide receivers, which makes you so over-reliant on a passing offense that has been so subpar this season, which really has led to the demise of your team. I would Dunchain this team. I know mathematically you're still alive, I guess. You win, and you see Sons of Chaos and TBD lose, assuming that they're not playing each other. I didn't even look at Week 13 matchups. You see both those two, they're not playing each other. You see both those teams, two teams lose, and you need to outscore Sons of Chaos because they're the one with the high point total. Actually, if Sons of Chaos loses, you're fine. If TBD loses, you need to outscore them by at least 18. So it's definitely possible. You need both teams to lose because Sons of Chaos has you point-wise. But I don't think you have a chance given your current roster. You're gonna line up unless Seattle has this gigantic performance, which I guess is possible. With the Dalvin Cook injury, I say it's done chain time for Team Crucifier. And in my eyes, it's a 7-team race. Obviously, could be wrong, but in my eyes, it's a 7-team race. So let's talk about that 7-team, Sons of Chaos. Sons of Chaos, another team that if they won, sweet spot. You're in a great position. You put up 130 points, which honestly would beat a good amount of teams in the league. I think about half the teams in the league you would have beaten. But you play a really strong Live and La Vida Yoda team that I've liked all season. Again, this team has leaned heavily on Tampa Bay's offense, and fortunately for this team, it hasn't really hurt them too much. In fact, this week, they benched Rob Gronkowski. So if they leaned heavier on that Tampa Bay offense, believe it or not, that would have made all the difference. Jared Cook with 10 points, Gronkowski 23 points. That's 13 points. You would have won by 1 point. Very frustrating there, but Tom Brady, at the end of the day, not with the performance you're looking for. That unfortunately cost you. This team does have the firepower to get a win. You need better performances from some of your better players. Fournette needs to continue to be great for you because that's been the lone bright spot as of recently for you. But you're going to need Devontae Smith and James Robinson to play better. I think this team does have a chance of capturing that spot. So let's see what happens there. The team that they would have to jump over is TBD. TBD with 100 less points or 84 less points than the team we were just chatting about, but you have that game advantage, so you're in a win and you're in situation. You had that situation last week as well, but you couldn't get the win over El Captain, only putting up 103 points. Cam Newton proving to be a very poor start, only 5 completed passes. 5 completed passes. That's historic. But the focus with this team for me is Saquon Barkley. I also have Saquon Barkley. Wow, 2 plugs for my own team. Just disgusting. I also have Saquon, and I honestly, despite the poor performance, I have more excitement around what's going on with Saquon than not because he's getting a heavy load, and that team got a win. If the Giants lose, I see them easing off the gas pedal, like, why are we even playing Saquon? He's our biggest asset, which at this point, it's been years, and he hasn't performed in a while, but he's going to be involved. He's getting a high snap share. They have some pretty decent matchups where they're going to be in the game moving forward. And Saquon is a focal part of that offense. They have a new offensive scheme. And I actually really like the looks that Saquon could potentially get right now. So I actually am kind of high, delusionally so, on Saquon moving forward, much higher than other people are given his awful, awful performance as of late. With that being said, this team definitely has its holes. You're not going to play Westbrook. I always mispronounce this guy's name. So Westbrook moving forward, but you have Madison. You get to plug in Madison, which is gigantic for you. You're getting Mahomes and Kelsey back. TBD, while you might not deserve because you have less points right now to be in the spot where you're winning, you're in, I think you're going to win, and I think you will be in next week. The team you're playing is going to be Live and La Vida Yoda. Didn't you just play Live and La Vida Yoda? I guess that was the other team. Wow, Live and La Vida Yoda, very, very involved in this playoff picture. They just played Sons of Chaos. They're now going to try and play another team that's fighting for a playoff spot. Team Live in the Vida Yoda is projected to absolutely murder you, but you haven't put in your Chiefs guys yet. But they will still likely be projected to win because this is a very good team. So let's just go ahead and talk about that team next as we go to the teams that are currently clinched the playoffs, and we'll talk a little bit less about because there's a little bit less excitement around the teams that did clinch the playoffs. But for Team Live in the Vida Yoda, again, coming off a big win, getting up 142 against Sons of Chaos, Team Live in the Vida Yoda in 5th place, so they clinched the playoffs. Very excited. I hear that they went absolutely crazy in Live in the Vida Yoda land. Fans were thrilled. It's been an up and down season. For me, I've been saying this team has been better than their record all season. They're finally at a record that they deserve. They deserve to be in the playoffs, but not a bye. And that's the position that they're currently in. it's mathematically impossible for them to get a bye because they would need to win. They need every team ahead of them to lose, and they need to outscore Pain Train by 130. So unless you see the most insane weekly performance you've ever seen, this team's looking at a first-round playoff matchup, and I think it's a team you want to avoid. 142 points is about what I expect from them, at least moving forward, because this was without Jalen Hurts having even a decent game, only putting up 6 points. You'd expect just from rushing alone that his floor is typically going to be in the double-digit land. Wide receivers are, we talked about all season. The running backs, I love. Wide receivers is where you're going to have to look to see if you have the firepower to go all the way. For you, the good news is that Gallup is a premier option with those guys down, but you get at least CeeDee Lamb back. I don't know Amari Cooper's status, but assuming that they're back, Gallup, not an option for you. So who do you go with? Hollywood, Thielen, Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, I said going into this week that I was concerned about him with Zach Wilson back. I hope it was in this recap. If not, I guess I could be making that up, but I'm not. I'm a Jets fan. Elijah Moore, fantastic receiver, but Zach Wilson not proven to give wide receivers consistent fantasy value just yet, even though it's only been 6 games in his career. I don't like Elijah Moore that much. He does have boom potential, so if you have to play him, you have to play him, but I'm a little bit down on him as your receiver. Thielen, a bit touchdown dependent, 5 catches, 62 yards. He's clearly the second fiddle to Jefferson as far as who's going to get the most receiving yards pretty consistently. But as far as touchdowns, Thielen seems still like he has that red zone role. So I'm okay with that start as well. And then Hollywood, 10 targets. I definitely like that start. So average wide receiver group, but fantastic running back group. Cordarrelle Patterson, fantastic. This is not a team that you're going to want to play in the playoffs, but it is also not a team that is the most destructive in the playoff picture. My hot take, that might not be a hot take anymore. I've been talking about it a couple times for another team in a different league, so I guess I have no proof of being high on him in this league, but Hunter Renfrow at this point is proving to be a fantasy startable player. And I think that there's a lot of decisions you have, especially with Cooks on your bench as well. You have a lot of wide receiver decisions to make. So I think, will you make it past the first round? It depends on that. But I like your team, of course, a lot. El Captain at 7-5. On fire, 172 points. They're amped over there. It's all Jonathan Taylor, of course, typically, but this week you get help from other places as well. Your wide receiver group, another wide receiver group that I think is pretty shallow. Of course, Devontae at the top is fantastic, but when you look past Devontae, with CD out, you had to play not great guys, T. Higgins and Van Jefferson, but they both get 20-plus points. The question is, do you trust them moving forward? Van Jefferson, who was on a huge play, I am a little bit concerned with him being behind the third receiver in that offense. And then T. Higgins also being behind Jamar. Both guys had the volume where you could justify it 8-plus targets, but I'm not super confident with them. So with CD coming back, who's that third guy that you're going to play? Or do you bump one of them into the flex and only play either Pitts or Knox? You know my opinion is 2 tight ends are never the way to go. So with all that being said, this is a similar team. You clinch the playoffs. Can you make a bye? Very unlikely. You would need to win 2 teams ahead of you to lose and outscoring Pain Train by 53. More likely, but still unlikely. So when you look at the bye picture, you're really looking at the chairman, Pain Train, and Glory Hole. Glory Hole clinched it, so it's Pain Train and the chairman. Let's look at the third team in the standings, which is the chairman. The chairman putting up 147 points in a win against Crucifier, 147 to 118. Josh Allen with a big performance. Zeke with a pretty solid performance. Darrell Henderson with a pretty solid performance, but both Zeke and Henderson banged up. So it's panic time in Team the Chairman land because you lose potentially 2 of your best running backs, and worst case would be if they play but are limited. So there's a lot to be concerned about. You have running back depth, but when you're looking at Damian Harris and Myles Gaskin or a banged up Zeke and Darrell Henderson, my guess is you're going to go with your studs. You have to play your studs, but there's a lot of risk there. So despite this team being one of the best in the league talent-wise, with these injuries, vulnerability has hit drastically. Fortunately for them, A.J. Dillon has been a stud, but he's going to be on a bye next week, so you do not have him next week. So there is a lot of vulnerability. It's a really good team. Once you get into the playoffs, I feel amazing about it. But the vulnerability as far as can you get into that bye spot, my guess is you're not going to have the firepower to do it, and Pain Train's going to keep that spot. Pain Train coming off a very tight win against Glory Hole in what could be a finals preview. The issue for Pain Train was DeAndre Swift getting banged up, and that, of course, is very damaging. But that makes the bye ultra important to get for Pain Train because you lose Swift, of course, for week 17, week 4, whatever your last week is, week 13. And in week 14, I would guess Swift is going to miss 2 weeks based on what I'm hearing. If that's the case, that's the first round of the playoffs. You need that bye. You do not want to be that vulnerable for the bye because when you have Swift and Mixon both on the field, this is a team that could win it all. This is absolutely a team that can win it all. Probably not my number one pick, but with Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming back and playing pretty well, it fills in a big gap for you. You get to play that running back. You have pretty good running back depth, by the way. The concern for this team is another team that with wide receiver depth, story of this league because you have so many wide receivers that you're playing. But the bottom line is that this team can win it all, but is not my favorite. Pain Train at 8-4 with DeAndre Swift hurt is another top team that is now left with a vulnerability. And that brings us to the 1 seed, Glory Hole. Another loss, 10-2. You didn't think you'd see this team lose 2 games in the regular season, but it does not matter. They're resting for the playoffs. And fortunately for this team, they're getting Aaron Jones back just in time. Aaron Jones came back this week, was limited, did not play well at all, but they will get him back after the bye. You fortunately have yourself a bye, so you will get it fully healthy, fully ready to go Aaron Jones to pair with Nick Chubb. And I am still high on Aaron Jones and what he's going to be doing in that offense. This team is still the strongest in the league. Still my prediction to win it all. I see no vulnerabilities. I guess the depth has taken a hit because Collins is proven to be worthless. Kareem Hunt is still clearly banged up. Miles Sanders is now banged up. But you still have a remarkable team and is my prediction to win it all. So as we look, finally, let's wrap this up. Looking at Week 13, the key matchups to look at, by far the key matchup to look at for the bye is Pain Train against the Chairman. As we mentioned, Chairman needs to win by at least 16 points. So not just win, but win by 16 points against Pain Train. Pain Train at a vulnerable position with DeAndre Swift hurt. But you plug in, of course, you already have the running back depth that you need. You plug in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and you could play Javonte Williams as well if you'd like in the flex. That leaves your wide receiver position a little bit less vulnerable. With Jarvis on bye, you'll probably have to go Godwin, Corey Davis, and Mooney. Not super pretty at all, but that's your wide receiver group that you're left with. The Chairman, I think, my prediction is Chairman wins this matchup, but not by enough points to get the bye. So it's going to be a close win for the Chairman, because as we mentioned, Chairman also in a vulnerable position. And I think Pain Train just barely hangs on to the bye, but projections currently have the Chairman overtaking Pain Train in the bye. So we're going to see what happens there. And by the way, I will correct that El Captain, this makes El Captain and Live in the Video to even by miracle mathematically eliminated because one of these two teams will end up with the bye. So let me actually correct what I said earlier in the video. So it's going to be the top 3 teams. 2 of them are going to get the bye, Glory Hole and either Pain Train or the Chairman. And then when we look at the playoff picture, it all goes through TBD. If TBD can beat Live in the Video Yoda, that is a bye for TBD. TBD projected again, as we mentioned, to get crushed. Once they put in the guys that are on bye, mainly those KC guys and Madison as well, they become a lot stronger. And while I like Live in the Video Yoda's team a little bit more, TBD currently with those guys in and with Madison now being that RB1, I think has a good chance to keep their playoff spot. But if they lose and Sons of Chaos wins, Sons of Chaos is in, and Sons of Chaos needs to beat the Plague, which is a very, very winnable matchup. So I think Sons of Chaos wins, and I do think TBD, though, is also going to somehow be able to pull off a win against a team I like a ton and Live in the Video Yoda. But this thing is all up in the air. Very exciting. I cannot believe this is last week. So I guess I'm wishing best of luck to all of you. And wow, this is the longest recap I've done in a long time. And wow, exciting. Can't wait to see who makes the playoffs. See you later.